Welcome. You are in the lab room. I'm your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me. Week number 17, National Football League for these two teams. Finish line is finally here, especially for the Texans. Finish line couldn't have gotten here fast enough. For the Tennessee Titans, you feel like you just ran out of time. And you look at this game, 6-9 Titans hosting the 2-13 Houston Texans. This ball game, AFC South, family business, two teams, one without a head coach, looking for a head coach, the other possibly could be without their head coach, looking for another coach. We'll talk about that at the end of this breakdown, but this is a game, if you're the Titans, you just got to win this game. There's nothing else to really say. There's nothing else really to talk about. There's no playoff implications in this game. If you're Mike Munchak, you got to win this game to at least have a chance at saving your job. And if you're the Titans, you've had a rough season. You've lost some games you probably had no business losing. You got to win this game. You got to beat the 2-13 Houston Texans at home. I know it's family business. Know it's going to be a close game. You got to find a way to win this game if you are the Tennessee Titans. If you're the Houston Texans, stop the bleeding. Stop the skid. Look, if you're a Texans fan, you're probably saying to yourself, look, we've come this far. No need to lose the number one overall pick now. Hey, lose the game. Get the number one overall selection in the draft so we can get our quarterback and move on. If you're a player on this team, you're like, look, can we stop this skid or what? Who loses 14 straight after winning the first two games of the season anyway? Well, that answer to that question is the Houston Texans. Let's break this game down from the eyes of me, Louie T. So, 2-13 Houston Texans at the 6-9 Tennessee Titans. Houston starts out with a 9-play, 65-yard touchdown drive, capped with a 3-yard Jonathan Grimes touchdown run. It's 7-0 Houston. And again, no Case Keenum in this game. He was injured. The last start probably for the career in Houston of Matt Schaub in this game. And a lot of names you never heard of. Jonathan Grimes, first career start. Never heard of him. You probably won't hear a lot more of him either. They had a guy in here, Ray Graham, in the game as well at the running back position. A lot of guys that, hey, you get to week 17 and you're just trying to cross the finish line where you're 2-13. It's a war of attrition, and the Texans are one of those teams that have succumbed to the war of attrition in the National Football League in 2013. But they start this game out beautifully. 9 plays, 65 yards. They get in the end zone at 7-0 Houston in this game. Tennessee gets a field goal on the board. So it's 7-3 Houston still up in this game. Jonathan Grimes coughs it up in Tennessee Titans territory. Fitzpatrick, however, gives it right back. Throws an interception. So nothing lost there if you are the Texans. The only thing that comes of this situation is that you were in Titans territory. You were in scoring range, whether it be a field goal or you ultimately get a touchdown. That remains to have been seen. But you take points off the board with that fumble, and Grimes was benched for the rest of the first half after that fumble. That's when we saw Ray Graham come into the game. And so Grimes had to sit down and let that one stew for a little while. But no harm, no foul. Fitzpatrick gives it right back with an INT of his own. So a big gainer on a wide receiver screen to Kendall Wright leads to a 55-yard Rob Baronis field goal right before the half. It's 7-6 Houston going into the break. And this was a funny looking play because they throw the wide receiver screen and Andy Levitre is going out to block and he runs squarely into Kendall Wright. But what that does on this play is it kind of redirects him and redirects everything because I think he was trying to come inside, and by running into Levitre, it redirected him back to the outside, which wasn't a bad thing because there was a lot of space outside, and I think he was going to make a mistake of coming inside to where the traffic was. By running into Levitre, it kind of threw the whole play out of whack and forced him back outside, and he ended up picking up a huge chunk of yardage, setting up that 55-yarder right before the half. It's 7-6. Texans still lead, but they're only up by 1 point at this juncture of the game. Akeem Ayers' interception off of a deflection leads to a CJK, and it's no longer CJ2K, it's just CJK, okay? Because he goes over 1,000 yards in this game, one of the few backs in league history to do it over the first 5 or 6 years of his career, goes over 1,000 yards in this game with a 10-yard touchdown run. It's 13-7, Tennessee up for the first time in this ball game after the touchdown run. Akeem Ayers' interception is the catalyst for that touchdown. So Titans finally take a lead in this game. A fumble on the center quarterback exchange by Houston in Tennessee Titans territory leads to a field goal. It's 16-7. Tennessee takes a 9-point lead, and more importantly, a 2-possession score lead in this football game. If you're a 2-13 team, these are the type of things you do to make sure that you lose football games. You don't lose 13 games by accident. That's a sign of a bad football team. And so you knew at some point the Texans were going to self-destruct in this game. You just didn't know when. That's the only question. It wasn't a question of if. It was a question of when. And this play to me just smelled like, hey, read this letter. This letter will self-destruct in 5 seconds. This team will self-destruct in 5 seconds. That fumbled quarterback center exchange really was the nail in the coffin in this game. To go down 2 scores, a team that doesn't score a lot of points, you're on the road, it just doesn't bode well for the Texans at this point. Big catch and run by Jonathan Grimes, who gets back into the game, leads to a 19-yard field goal. It's 16-10, Tennessee still up by 6. Titans up by 6. Texans needing a touchdown to still win this game. 19-yard field goal says to me, you get all the way down to the 1-yard line. To me, you're 2-13. Go for a touchdown there. What are we doing here? What are we saying here? Again, Wade Phillips in charge, never a good thing. You're 2-13. What are you kicking a field goal in this situation for? You either score the touchdown here or, and I get it, you get the game down to 1 possession, I guess. But again, if you're the Texans, you need to get the big score out of the way. You need to get the touchdown. I mean, how many times do you think you're going to get back down there? You're not a good football team. Go for the jugular. Go for the touchdown. And then if you got to come back down and get the field goal to win later, at least you don't have to get as close to do that. I just didn't understand the logic there. But anyway, they cut it to a 6-point game, 1-score possession. They get the stop that they need late in the ball game to get the football back with a chance to win. Brett Kern puts together a beautiful punt, pinning them deep in their own territory. You couple that with a Matt Schaub interception to Michael Griffin to seal the deal, and the Titans hang on for a 16-10 victory. That was a fitting end to the Matt Schaub era in Houston. He's been a guy this season that has turned the ball over in the most inopportune times. Why not finish the season off with an inopportune interception to end the game and abruptly end the rest of this season for the Houston Texans? Let's talk about the Titans, though, down the stretch here in this game. Mike Munchak, been with this organization over 3 decades. He's a Hall of Fame player, was an offensive lineman for this team for many, many years. Then was a coach, an offensive line coach. Then was the head coach, still is, but they have a huge decision to make in Tennessee. Does he come back after this season? It's tough. They wrestled with this same decision last year, and I think Bud Adams remained loyal to him last season, gave him an opportunity. Bud Adams is no longer there as he passed away. Don't know if the brass in Tennessee will allow him to remain the coach based off of loyalty. I think he's used up all of his loyalty points in Tennessee. And here's why. Tennessee with no home win on this season since week 4 against the Jets. Okay, you can't lose that many games at home and expect to be a contender in this league. Okay, week 4 is a long time. We're in week 17. You haven't won at home since week 4. And again, you played the Jacksonville Jaguars at home since then. Haven't been able to win since week 4. That's pretty bad. 2-4 versus the AFC South. Handling AFC South family business hasn't been a specialty of this Tennessee Titans football team. Look, the Colts were the only juggernaut in this division. The Colts were the only team over 500 in this division. There's no reason, and I repeat, no reason at all not to be 3-3 at worst in this division, not to be 4-2 in this division. Keep in mind, there's a 2-14 Houston Texans team in this division. There's a 4-12 Jacksonville Jaguars team in this division. There's no reason for you to have not swept those two teams this season, yet that has not been the case. And so a 2-4 mark in the AFC South, not very good, not especially when there's a combined 30 record of teams below you in this division. That's hard to stomach. Not being able to sweep those two teams and not being able to be at least 4-2 in this division doesn't bode well for Mike Munchak. I just don't know if he's going to be back or not. And then you also got to look at the fact that Tennessee Titans fans are somewhat sold. They are trying to sell people on the fact that Jake Locker is the answer in Tennessee. I don't know how much longer you can continue to sell yourself on the fact that he's the quarterback of the future when he can't stay healthy for a full 16-game slate. I don't know how much longer you can pin the future and the hopes of this franchise on a guy that can't play 16 games. I think all of those things are going to be the undoing of Mike Munchak in Tennessee. I think he's not back. I think at the end of the day, when they sit down and they wrestle back and forth with the decision of whether to bring him back or to find a new head coach in Tennessee, I think they will ultimately say, hey, it's time for us to hit the reset button, time for us to get a different coach in here. I don't know how I feel about Mike Munchak, because I feel like with all the injuries and some of the underachievements of this team, to win 7 games, not that bad. But again, when you start the season off 3-1 and there's so much hope and optimism in Tennessee to finish up the season the way you did, and again, you lose Jake Locker, things change, and it's just hard. But numbers don't lie. Numbers don't lie in this instance. And you look at no home wins since week 4 until this last win in week 17, 2-4 against a very porous division. You get your first divisional win a week ago against Jacksonville. I don't really know what to say. If they fire him, I can't disagree with that move. If they retain him, can't say that I blame them for that either. It'll be interesting to see how Black Monday plays out in Tennessee as Mike Munchak finds a way to win his last game potentially in Tennessee, 16-10 over the Houston Texans. But I don't know if it's enough to salvage his job in Tennessee. That's going to do it for this breakdown. I thank you for joining me. If you're the Texans, it's simple. You're on the clock. Do your homework. Find the quarterback of the future. You can't miss. This is one of those situations you can ill afford to miss on this pick. Find the guy that best suits you. And the first things first, find your head coach, okay? Find your head coach. Figure out who that guy is going to be. Allow him to come in and implement his offensive scheme, whatever that may be. Find a quarterback that best suits his offensive scheme and the way you're going to run it, and move on from there. Find all the coaches that you need, whether you clean house, get a new defensive and offensive coordinator, or Wade Phillips is going to remain your defensive coordinator and you bring in an offensive coordinator, whatever the case may be. Find all the pieces necessary to the puzzle to make drafting your quarterback that much simpler. That's the first goal at hand, is finding the head coach. You've already went out and said, hey, I want a head coach with coaching experience. I want a head coach by Tuesday. I don't care when you find the head coach of the future in Houston. Just find him. Make sure it's the right guy for the job. I expect it to be one of 2 guys. And honestly, they talked about Bill O'Brien. They interviewed him. You said you want a head coach with head coaching experience. Bill O'Brien doesn't fit that bill. Unless you lied to me, then I'm thinking it's Ken Wisenhunt or it's going to be Lovie Smith. You said that you were going to name your head coach on Tuesday. That was the report. And I think your thinking was Ken Wisenhunt and the San Diego Chargers would be eliminated from playoff contention by a win by the Dolphins. That would allow you the opportunity to interview him on Monday, and you would announce him as your head coach on Tuesday. That was my thinking. That's why you came out and said, hey, we'll have our head coach by Tuesday, because you were going to interview Ken Whisenhunt Monday, and by Tuesday, you'd be announcing him as the next head coach of the Houston Texans. Now that the Chargers are in the postseason, that has been put on hold. I could be wrong. You could already know who your head coach is, but I think that's where you were going with this coaching search. And I think he'd make a wonderful candidate in Houston. Great offensive mind. I thought he should have never been fired from Arizona in the first place, but he deserves another chance to be a head coach. He will be a head coach, and I think Houston would be a great place and a great fit for him and his offensive mind. We'll see if that's the direction that you're going in, whatever the case may be. Okay? Forget about all of that. You got to hit a home run with this quarterback. Whoever that guy is in this up-and-coming draft, figure it out, make the right selection, and move forward. Because this team has a lot of talent, especially on the defensive side. You still got Andre Johnson. You got Hopkins, who's emerging. You still got some pieces. If Arian Foster can come back from this back injury and be healthy. Look, I don't know what you're going to do with Ben Tate, free agency or not. I don't know if you're going to pay him the money he's looking for. I think he's a backup running back in this league. I don't think he's a starter. He might think more highly of himself. Somebody might throw a little bit of more money at him than you're willing to pay him. I don't know what that situation holds either. But again, a lot of talent on this team. The quarterback position is what's holding you back right now. Figure that out, and you might figure your way back to the top of this division. Who knows? We'll see. But you've got a lot to do in this offseason coming up in 2014. But that's going to do it for this particular program. I thank you for joining me here in the lab room. If it happens in the National Football League, whether big or small, we cover it all here in the lab room. Thank you for joining me. A lot more games to break down in week number 17 as we continue to go through the finish line. Come back and join me as I continue to break down week number 17, the all-important week number 17 in the National Football League.